Hey everybody, this is Matt here again with another game from Chess Live. I was playing the white pieces against PubChesser, who was ranked 1423. This was a blitz game, 5 minutes for each side, and I'm going to jump right into the analysis. The game started out with pawn to d4, pawn to d5, pawn to c4, and pawn to e6, initially going into a semi-Slav defense by black. Following up comes knight to c3, and after knight to c6, the opening now transposed into a Chigorin defense, which is a less common decline line of the Queen's Gambit. Play from here continued with knight to f3 and h6. White was fearing that the bishop was going to come here to pin the knight once it jumped, and just blocks that off, as well as taking this jump point away from the knight. Play from here continues with pawn to e3, making the pawn on c4 much easier to recapture if black decides to take. And now we see knight to f6, and we see queen to c2 from here, just trying to see if black has intentions of capturing this pawn, so I don't have to move this bishop multiple times that are not necessary. From here we see pawn to a6, taking away this jump point from the knight, and also getting ready to maybe capture, so that when my bishop recaptures on this point, this pawn can come up with tempo. From here we see bishop to d2. This is one of the last waiting moves that I'm going to play, just trying to wait for black to take this pawn as long as possible before moving the bishop. From here we see bishop to d7, and so it's obvious that black does not intend to capture until I move my bishop at least. So from here I go into the gambit of playing pawn to g4, trying to open up this file for my rook to later attack. If black decides to castle kingside, it will be aiming right at the king. And if black decides to castle queenside, I'll still have a strong attack over here on the king side built up. Black takes this gambit and captures the knight, and now the rook comes to g1 attacking the knight, and the knight just retreats back. From here I castle, and one thing to note is that this pawn is very weak. This bishop's having to watch this pawn, so this bishop cannot move until this pawn is defended somehow, and that's going to be really awkward for black. And what black ends up doing is playing pawn to g6. This is weakening the kingside pawn structure, so it appears that black is most likely going to be castling on the queen side, or fianchettoing the bishop if they're going to castle on the king side. From here we see king to b1. This was played for two reasons. The first is to try to get the king a little bit closer to the corner. That way it's only on the light square diagonal and not as quite as open as it would be, as well as an additional waiting move for this pawn to be captured. From here we see bishop to g7, fianchettoing the bishop. Black now has the option of castling on the king side, and from here I see that I make a very terrible blunder that black does not see, and it's bishop to d3. I played this move because this pawn is now a free piece, and that's because this bishop can now just capture the pawn, and after black recaptures, the queen can come crashing into black's king side, checking the king and being able to recapture this bishop at the on the following turn with the support of the rook. So this pawn was free. Black recognized that and simply moved the queen over to e7 to indirectly defend this bishop. But better than that would have been to move the knight to b4, attacking the queen and my bishop. And the only piece defending my bishop is the queen, which has to move. So this bishop would become a free piece, and the queen would then have to move again back up. So this was a very bad blunder. Again, this is blitz. I didn't see that, and neither did my opponent. We were simply reacting to the threat that was obvious and not threats that were not quite as obvious. So play continued with the queen going to e7. From here, I bring the rook to g2, getting ready to stack my rooks. This queen is indirectly attacking this bishop, so I wanted to get more pressure on this g file. Again, this knight threat is present, but as I said earlier, neither one of us saw that continuation. From here we see e5, and doing this, I decided that breaking my center, namely the d4 pawn, was worth the position that I would gain, because this queen can be forced off the defense of this bishop, and in the following way. Pawn captures on e5, knight captures on e5, knight captures on e5, and now queen captures on e5, and now this bishop will fall because of bishop captures on g6, pawn captures on g6, queen captures on g6 check, king to d8, getting out of additional checks by moving to the two other options, and now the bishop falls. This is followed up with the rook to g8, and now we have a situation that I was afraid was not worth the material I had gained. I couldn't get my queen out of the way because this rook is being attacked if I move her, and I had to think for an exceptional amount of time before simply going with a continuation that was winning, which is queen captures rook, knight captures queen, rook to g8 check. The bishop has to block unless you want to lose the other rook, and now we see the knight come up to d5, and we see the king try to get out of the pin with the bishop to d7. From here we see bishop to c3, and this rook is opposite of the king, and it's very close from becoming a discovered check. And black responds to this by checking my king scoots over. Better was scooting it closer to the rook, but it was more of a knee-jerk reaction, just moving the king over where it was safe from any kind of diagonals. And from here we see, because I'm threatening to check, in fact check take queen at the moment, and if something else moves beside the king, check take rook. So there's a lot of threats going on, and black tried the rook over to d8. This was not the best way to go about. What black really had in mind was that I could no longer check take queen, because if I check and took queen, black would have a checkmate, back rank checkmate by taking my rook. But black overlooked the move bishop to f6, which is what the move was played in the game, and now this rook is toast, and the entire plan that black had is falling apart, and black resigns at this stage of the game. And that's all I have for the analysis. I thought this was a really exciting game. There was a lot of sharp lines that were being played, and I thought this was a really nice game to do an analysis over. And thanks, and subscribe, and thanks for watching.